I know that my kid's life in 2050 will be very different from the one my parents have been experiencing because of climate change. So I'm kind of, okay, there is something very practical that I can observe, how the life is different.
You're talking about the superpower that comes from moving from ambition to implementation. Because when you start showing, not just talking some abstract or generic numbers, but bringing in a neighborhood what fighting climate change is. It means better neighborhoods. It means better health. It means more job opportunities. Yes, of course, there is a transition to go through, but we are going in a new, transformed state. Not into something that we cannot manage. We just need to transform and reinvent the system. Yeah. But it will deliver so much co-benefits. Not all the climate arguments would work with all the stakeholders. So we need to collect a number of arguments, which means, again, starting working across different goals, not just climate adaptation, not just climate mitigation, not just biodiversity, but everything together. Because by putting them together, first of all, we anticipate trade-offs. So it means that we can go faster. And second, we can bring in the discourse and give back the feeling of what this means to everybody. Because you can speak different arguments. And this is our most powerful tool, actually, to get climate action really materialize.
Hello. Passionate about sustainability, energy, and climate? You're in the right place. Welcome to Energetic. I'm Cornelis, and together we will engage with people who dedicate their lives to climate justice and making a just energy transition happen. They may be activists, scientists, policymakers, or other enthusiasts, just like you. Let the life stories and insights inspire you to build a better future for people and the planet.
Today on the show, we have Giulia Ulpiani. She's a scientific project officer at the European Commission Joint Research Centre, specializing in climate change mitigation and adaptation in cities and providing scientific, methodological, and technical support to the EU's 100 climate neutral and smart cities mission. With a background in engineering and a PhD focused on energy and environmental applied physics, Giulia's work bridges academia and policymaking to tackle the challenges of urban climate neutrality, overheating, climate adaptation, and energy efficiency. She has a knack for intertwining different disciplines, anticipating synergies and trade-offs, and turning them into actionable strategies for sustainable cities. Giulia's insights demonstrate how smart, just, and inclusive transitions can reshape our urban futures through pragmatic urban decarbonization pathways. Giulia, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Marine. Many thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Giulia. So, what sparked your interest in the intersection of energy, climate, and cities? You started with applied physics, right? Was there a defining moment or experience that really set your career path in motion?
Defining moment? Well, do you mind if I turn this question into a storytelling opportunity?
Yeah, go ahead. We love that.
Yeah, I think my answer is not exactly what most people would expect, because many who know me, they think I was born a scientist. And indeed, for people undertaking a PhD and continuing their career in a research environment, it's either a very long and thoughtful journey or a personal discovery during their studies. But for me, I had never thought about becoming a scientific researcher. I've always been a very practical person. So in my head, I would have concluded my studies as a mechanical engineer and then sought a job in a firm doing some nice stuff, possibly with a touch of craftsmanship, because I like creating things with my own hands. But life has a certain way of being bumpy every now and then. So without going into the details, but the decision to start a PhD was a family decision to somewhat protect my mother, my sister, and myself. So I was kind of forced into it. But I was a very good student, and I had no trouble getting a PhD offer, but still not what I had planned to do in my life. But I would say that lucky for me, I easily become passionate about projects whose mission resonates with my own ethos. So I kind of connected straight away with the very concept of scientific research. And I remember my first days, I was spying on my professor and the lab technicians to try to learn as much as I could and trying to figure out how I could be useful. So it seemed I had a knack for smart optimization, and my group was working on energy efficiency in buildings. So voila, the match was quite obvious. So I started working on smart logics to reduce energy consumption in buildings. And what I remember most fondly about the time are the days that I spent on experimental setups, building mockups, arranging sensor networks, coding the logics, and then what I think became my strong suit. So data collection, quality assessment, and data analysis. But a great feature of PhDs is the opportunity to spend some time abroad. And for me, the dreamland was Australia. So I left Italy to spend a year there, and I was extremely lucky. Because on my first day, I was asked whether I wanted to keep working on my topic, buildings, or maybe join a research group led by Professor Santamouris on urban overheating and Italian effects, so different topic.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. But Professor Santamouris is a pioneer and an inspiration for anyone working in the field. And since what happens inside a building is strongly connected to what happens outside, I just thought, what if I reframe the question? So, do you want to expand your knowledge by moving from the building to the city scale? And for me, put that way, the answer was obvious. So I started learning a different language, a language made of surface materials, emissivity, evapotranspiration, urban layout, urban planning. And what I appreciated the most was that I was given so many responsibilities, and I realized I was quite hungry for them. So I was even asked to become a drone pilot the first month to monitor.
Drone pilot?
Yes, a drone.
I think you're my first guest being a drone pilot.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I love
I'm
that.
a professional drone pilot. Nice to meet you. The purpose was to monitor the surface temperature of major Australian cities, which I did. And oh my God, that was really an adventure. But also my professor was, and still he is, a strong advocate of the holistic dimension and approach. So connecting the dots. And this means that our studies on urban heat were not limited to thermodynamics, but they aimed at safeguarding cities from extreme heat and localized heat pockets as a way to achieve multiple objectives. So, for instance, reducing energy consumption, especially peak electricity demand, guaranteeing comfortable outdoor spaces so we can enjoy life outside instead of constantly seeking a heat shelter indoors. And also it's about protecting lives by reducing heat-related mortality and morbidity. So for me, it was fascinating, the idea that by acting on just one parameter, urban temperature, we could generate widespread benefits for so many. And if you ask me, this is the real glory of climate action. So you do one thing good, and if it's planned correctly, you unlock an incredible number of co-benefits and self-sustaining mechanisms. So this is also why we need climate literacy and interdisciplinarity at decision-making levels, because if you understand how things are connected, you also know how to spend that €1 wisely. So that's also why part of my subsequent postdocs focused more on the connections, for example, heat and pollution, understanding the linkages and the potential for coordinated action. I also had the chance to work on some groundbreaking science, I'd say, on super cool materials, which really could be a game changer in the future. But at the point in time, there was still something that kept nagging at me, like, why on earth aren't we doing more when we already have plenty of workable solutions?
Yeah.
What are we doing wrong?
You start a podcast. In my case, you start a podcast.
Yeah. But so what happened is just I started thinking about those variables that I had so rarely tried to include in my thinking and research. And I'm talking about political environment, governance mechanisms, financial constraints, lack of social engagement, regulatory red tape, you name it. But to me, here comes another defining moment. So that's where I joined the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And for me, this is the perfect place if you want to understand the nexus between science and policy. But to be honest, I tiptoed into my new contract 3.5 years ago with mixed feelings. Like on one end, I could see my contribution as a scientist. God had seen so much of what was brewing in the scientific world, and I thought I could help bring it to light. But on the other hand, I realized I'd never truly understood what a city is, which was daunting because I had worked on cities and buildings my whole life, and such a revelation. But it's just not about a complex bundle of interconnected physical systems. That's way too easy. It's people, places, culture, history, legacy effects, social dynamics, economic forces, governance structures, power struggles, behavioral patterns, institutional inertia. So many kind of invisible constraints that shape daily life and urban metabolism, and so much that I had never considered before. So I think for me, the project I contribute to now, it's been really an eye-opener. And I'm talking about the 100 climate neutral and smart cities mission, of course. But imagine a group of cities of different political backgrounds, size, climate, level of prior experience and commitment in climate action. They all pledging to become zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, just 5 years from now. So it's a massive commitment, and I believe a true lighthouse for those who feel a bit of anxiety and recognize the risks of climate inaction. So, and I remember when the cities that were selected were announced, was a very, very simple video about the transformation, everything turning from gray to green. And at the end, there was a list of the city names. And I remember crying a little bit that day. Tears of happiness, of course, because I thought it was a powerful sign that not all humanity is blind and indifferent to a planet that is rapidly becoming unlivable. And God, I always think about my little nephew when I dwell on these thoughts. And happiness because I'm fascinated by what the human mind can create, for sure, but even more so by what the human heart can do and achieve when it's fully committed to doing good. So, and happiness, of course, because I was in some very small way part of it, and I could help. So working for the European Commission blew my perspective wide open. So I went from tackling energy and climate to suddenly dealing with transport, waste, industrial processes, product use, agriculture, forestry, land use. And not just climate adaptation, so dealing, for example, with urban overheating, but much more so with climate mitigation, so bringing in the reduction of greenhouse gases in cities, that it's really, really challenging. And more importantly, not about a physical world anymore, or maybe not just that. A lot of anthropogenic systems and dynamics, and perhaps for the first time I'm working to something that is close to that holistic paradigm that I really bumped into when I was in Australia.
That's so fascinating because you really started with the material and now in a way you are getting into the why. You know, we tend to
getting into the why, but also I really think that it's a natural thing. Like these things are so naturally connected. So it's just about keeping exploring. And in the way, I think that's what science is about. So for me, buildings, cities, and climate, they're just the same thing.
Never stopping asking yourself some questions and questioning what you see and how the different things do work, and really questioning the laws of human dynamics in a way, from the laws of thermodynamics to the laws of human dynamics, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm still not quite sure which one is more complex, but definitely they keep each other like reinforced in their complexity. So it's good to have a good view of both of them. If you look only at one, you fail at getting a big picture. And then whatever you propose is not actionable because you're not talking the right language. You need to have many in your vocabulary. It's really all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say a family or a person who will do things always the same way, you really need to convince them to change something about the way they process things, whether it is as, let's say, a worker who has always used a certain type of material to construct a wall, or somebody who has always used their car to go from point A to B. That's, you need to kind of change those dynamics, but at the same time, new materials are becoming available, new ways of transportations are becoming available, and you need to create the a fertile ground for innovations to happen. And indeed, innovation seems to be quite a trendy topic also with the let's say, the 2025 political priorities of the European Commission on competitiveness. And there is a huge emphasis also on innovation and the fact that we need innovation. But if it is also very clear from science that if we all have the same background, we will not get into the kind of conversation that actually lead to innovation. So that's why it's really important to have different profiles on board and different backgrounds. And the experience you shared about Australia and how mind-boggling it was, a really life-defining moment that was really super inspiring. And I never had anybody from Australia on the show, but I would love to. Yeah, I would love to have that. Someone, if you are listening from Australia, please reach out to me. I am very curious to hear you. Yeah, that would be really nice. So, big question, Giulia, do you still use drones in ISPA, where you are based?
Oh, well, for recreational purposes, for sure. Like actually, it's all about Australia again, because I was in Australia 3 or 4 months ago, and there were so many stunning landscapes that I decided to buy a new drone, and now it's with me. So yes, I'm using it, but definitely not for science purposes, to be honest. But so far, never say never.
Yeah, exactly. I really see there could be some really interesting labs with children, school children, understanding a little bit how, what kind of even citizen science, how it can be based and used with drones, etc. But we're talking now about the people who are enthusiastic and willing to talk. On the other hand, you've been working on strategies for urban decarbonization. It's very complex, and you said it, that maybe it's even more complex than the laws of thermodynamics. So what are the biggest, let's say, roadblocks cities face in achieving net zero? And do you know how and when maybe they could overcome them?
Well, cities are a bit of a special player in the climate dialogue. They are the governance level that is closest to people, to places, and also to their interconnections. So this allows them to see and listen more, to adapt more, to go hyper-local in their interventions, to monitor and adjust, and also to act as living labs, so to innovate. And of course, their room for maneuver and financial capacity and authority are a bit more constrained than, for example, national governments. So as a result, they must operate within their remit, capacity, and sphere of influence. And this is often the biggest source of roadblocks and frustration, if you will. But to answer your question, I think I can be quite precise about the barriers that most cities faced in the pursuit of decarbonization, because we actually mapped and ranked them as part of our scientific support for the city's mission. So I guess it comes as no surprise that the lack of funding and financing schemes is at the very top, because tapping into capital markets and effectively stimulating private investments through, for instance, public-private partnerships or blended finance is not something that most cities are familiar with, while issuing green or similar bonds is simply not an option for all cities for a number of reasons. So cities need to innovate even in this domain and rethink their role in mobilizing capital. But for example, they can work collaboratively, and in some ways, this can extend their investment power. I think the energy sector provides a very good example in this regard. So cities can engage in joint commitments and ventures with entities such as energy suppliers, private district heating operators, construction firms, even rental companies. And additionally, strategies like energy performance contracting, revolving funds, incentive systems, revenue distribution, they offer the potential to create positive circles of investment that may even render decarbonization efforts cost neutral over time, while fostering social equity, of course. And I think a good example here is energy communities, because the income generated by energy communities can be reinvested into new initiatives, job creation, service development, and this helps maintain the momentum of transformation.
Yeah, and there are also some cities with, let's say, energy service companies really within the cities as a service department, right?
And absolutely, having this strong and advanced collaboration and partnerships is really key for a city to perceive themselves as a bigger entity, capable of triggering a bigger impact. And even clustering across different cities, it may even increase their purchasing power. They can really start thinking in groups. So, but this is about the funding and financing. And I think we all know that this is indeed a roadblock in many ways, but there are solutions indeed. And the second barrier, I think it's even harder, in my opinion, and it's about the fragmentation of responsibilities. I think it's particularly complex to solve because there are competing mechanisms at stake and they need to be carefully balanced. Because when it comes to climate issues, scientists think about the many disciplines involved and they start seeking collaboration. And for cities, it's just the same. But what a city sees is also a multitude of departments, units, bodies, authorities, stakeholders, lobbies, and interests that must be activated and coordinated. And this is the right approach, because a powerful enabler of climate action is indeed this sense of polycentric governance. So a lot of collaboration, collective ownership, multiple centers of decision making, and also a web of interdependencies through science, policy, and practice partnerships. But this multi-actor scenario, of course, can introduce risks, such as poor coordination, conflicting objectives, organizational inefficiencies, and they can even lead to operational paralysis, even hinder accountability and ambition, and could potentially exclude certain groups from the process. So this doesn't bode well in terms of pace and fairness of the transformation. And for this reason, cities really need to strike a balance between effective and rapid decision-making and real co-creation.
Yeah, so, and there's a lot of inertia, right, from services.
Yeah, indeed. So this really requires some sort of governance restructuring that favors cross-cutting coordination and also transitioning away from customary siloed approaches. And here I'm happy to say that the city's mission is triggering profound positive transformation. So it's something that we already perceive as a success of the initiative. So if I go back to what I said at the beginning, by linking the dots, decisions and investments can generate higher impact. So it means that an effective, multi-level and coordinated governance structure is key in this regard. So there are so many other barriers. Some are visible, some are not, some are more context-specific. Most of them transcend really technocratic considerations. And also the ranking shifts if you're looking at buildings, if you're looking at transport, if you're looking at waste. So I think that more than looking into the barriers, what is perhaps even easier is condensing the key recommendations and solutions. So maybe we can go to the second part of your question that is possibly more inspiring and optimistic.
Yeah, how to overcome it. But before we get into that, let me share you something that happened to me actually in these days. So in front of my daughter's school, they have the municipality also help with the parents from the school. There has been this investment to make the front of the school is really like a kindergarten, so the kids are very small, to make it really like pedestrian. So to remove the cars, make sure that there are some trees and the kids can play and be safe. They leave the school and they are safe. Exactly. And a few days ago, there was this presentation by the townhouse of really this project, and it was a very rainy day, so not so many people showed up. Some parents were there, including me, of course. I'm nerdy in all parts of my life, but there were also
you're consistent.
Yeah, exactly. I try to be. It's not easy, but I try to be. But there were also neighbors from the area, and some of them were really happy with the change. They were really like, okay, so doing this investment, planting trees, putting this kind of material on instead of dark concrete, but putting something a little bit more permeable in white colors, etc. It will reduce the urban heat island and therefore make us use less air conditioning in the summer, etc. But there were also some people who were saying, but how do I park my car? Because this has removed 8 parking spots. And I would say at the level of a city, 8 parking spots is really small. But at the level of this person who was of a certain age, that was making such a difference. But I was really, really in awe with what the civil servants and architects did, because they took the time to explain the benefits.
That's lovely.
And at the end of the conversation, the person who was so tense, she was so almost aggressive, right? She was very much like, oh, it's true that it's going to be nice. My life is going to be nicer. And in a sense, you could see that she was taking pride in it. So yeah, I found it really super inspirational because a part of me, I had my kids running around and so on. And I was like, okay, this is so much nicer. And I know that my kids' life in 2050 will be very different from the one my parents have been experiencing because of climate change. So I'm kind of, okay, there is something very practical that I can observe, how the life is different.
You're talking about the superpower that comes from moving from ambition to implementation. Because when you start showing, not just talking some abstract or generic numbers, but bringing in a neighborhood what fighting climate change is. It means better neighborhoods. It means better health. It means more job opportunities. Yes, of course, there is a transition to go through, but we are going in a new, transformed state, not into something that we cannot manage. We just need to transform and reinvent the system. Yeah. But it will deliver so much co-benefits because that's a key thing. Like, not all the climate arguments would work with all the stakeholders. So we need to collect a number of arguments, which means, again, starting working across different goals, not just climate adaptation, not just climate mitigation, not just biodiversity, but everything together. Because by putting them together, first of all, we anticipate trade-offs. So it means that we can go faster. And second, we can bring in the discourse and give back the feeling of what this means to everybody, because you can speak different arguments. And this is our most powerful tool, actually, to get climate action really materialize. So yeah, I totally agree. And it's very nice to hear about these stories, to be honest, when it's not so top down and it's bottom up and top down together.
Exactly. And the city I live in is part of the climate neutral and smart city cohort. And I know it still faces a lot of opposition and roadblocks, etc. But in a way, seeing this kind of, desire for genuine discussion in action was really super inspiring.
To really be together, because we need everybody really to play their bit. But also I think we are also starting to think about justice in a way that is not a problem, but starts becoming a solution. Because, we know that if climate action is undertaken with a justice in mind, that this could exacerbate social divides, it could contribute to asymmetric popularization. So many detrimental impacts. And this weakens consensus on the transformation, makes it short-lived. But when climate action is designed with, for instance, distributional impacts in mind, it serves many. It responds to social dynamics, listens to them, builds a strong foundation that will help it survive political cycles. And this means that a just transition, a transition that is for all, explained to all, is a safe transition. It will happen. And it's also about having an integrated urban planning in the back of our heads, because we cannot leave aside certain population groups. We cannot overlook the peri-urban and rural areas and their local value. And also, again, bring together all the goals that we need to achieve, because we don't have much time, to be honest, to do everything. So we cannot afford starting a path that then we need to correct because we didn't think about something else at the beginning. So this is really the time where we connect the dots and expand the financial capacity by doing so. This will all make it happen at a faster pace.
Yeah, and I would say that it's like a thread between all the conversations here on this podcast. And for extra inspiration, you can listen to the whole back catalog, right? We have 70 episodes that really address this kind of issues. So
that's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there are so many good things happening. We really need to kind of make sure that we hear about it. And because if we stay in our little corner, we are too prone to climate anxiety in a way. So that's really something. And also there is so much, let's say, space given to bad news in the news, whereas Of course, the science is not always rosy. Let's be honest. But science should really be at the center of science, policies, and news, etc. And it's something you have been very vocal about. Why do you think there is a gap between climate science and how it's presented to the public and used or misused by policymakers?
Well, I'll be very concise on this one, but in my opinion, there is still a gap between climate science and its public or policy representation, and it often stems from the complexity of science data clashing with the simplicity that is needed for communication. So science really speaks in nuances and probabilities, and while media and policy often favor clear, immediate narratives, this creates a bit of a translation challenge. But in addition, we are in an era flooded with information platforms and also plagued by fake news. And discerning the truth from fiction becomes a daunting task. And this erodes public confidence in whatever is currently labeled as science. So I've had the chance to speak in some secondary school webinars, and I was a bit frustrated to witness that indeed the young generations, they truly believe that the good information is on the social media. And even if they say they don't, that's still the first place where they go hunting for knowledge. And so I think to overcome these barriers, science really needs its own trusted stages. So platforms dedicated to sharing accurate, verified information where people can confidently say, I trust this. And by doing so, we can ensure that science remains a sort of guiding light in decision-making and public discourse. But also, going back now to this lost in translation kind of challenge, we also need storytellers because we need to turn the data into compelling narratives that resonate with both the mind and the heart. So, because, for instance, any citizens can be a storyteller. They can become climate ambassadors in doing so in their own neighborhood, for example. Because what I understood now is that people believe people. Cities believe cities, industry believes industry. So the same information coming from a scientist would not have the same effect. There needs to be space for a science-guided exchange among peers. And I think trust needs to be the keystone of scientific literacy at some point, truly.
I love that. It's totally music to my ears, and it's also what I've been trying to foster through this podcast again. So that's really, really great to share this feeling with you. But you mentioned trust. Let's say that one of the most trusted partner in this and is the International Panel on Climate Change, and you have recently joined it. And yeah, it's been, so congratulations. You might be are you the youngest member? But so if for those who don't know, the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, has been a key player in shaping climate narratives and a key actor really in addressing misinformation. So one of the duty of the IPCC is to make complex climate science accessible and actionable by the different groups you mentioned, by everyday people, by cities, by national governments, by the industry. And you have been working at really ensuring that the science is accurate and the news about climate change is science-based, and really there is trust conclusion, right?
Of course. Now, I think synthesizing and assessing climate science while ensuring accuracy is really a challenge of growing difficulty. And this is what the IPCC is tasked with. So it surely represents one of those trustable stages that I was mentioning earlier, and possibly the biggest one for climate. And also has a view of representing both the developed and the developing world equally, which I feel is also my next step in broadening my view. And I think the level of trust achieved by IPCC reports is remarkable, and it's also the essence of their impact. So yeah, I'm really, really honored to be given this chance to contribute. Also, for me, it's the first involvement with the IPCC, and I want to see how this powerful machine works and serves the entire world so efficiently. And because really synthesizing, assessing, and making science accessible, it is really not something that is something that happens in a simple way without any hurdles in the way. So it's really something that requires a powerful machine to work at this level. So, but then we need to reach the everyday people. So
Yeah.
I think that in order to make complex climate science accessible and actionable, we need to leverage these accurate science stages and turn their messaging into clear, relatable storytelling that connects data to everyday experiences. So I'm going back a little bit to what I said before. So these two parts. There is still the complex science that has to be turned into clear messaging. And that's, for example, something that the IPCC is really good at. And then we need the storytelling. And because scientists and institutions, we can use so many things like visuals, analogies, digital tools to transform intricate concepts into something that really can engage with the public and create some narratives that can resonate with their everyday experiences. But this also means that partnerships with trusted media outlets and dedicated platforms for verified information are crucial to ensure news about climate change remain accurate and science-based. And this all involves a lot of transparency, consistent messaging, and empowering communities with knowledge. Because in this way, people not only understand the science, as that's what the people in front of the school building were trying to do. That's trying to make people understand the science. But I think the next step is that people need to feel inspired to act on it. That's where we need to get, because climate protection is not something, should not be something that bothers me, makes me pay more, makes me choose a different car, a different type of food. Climate protection needs to become my own and my family protection. So if we get there, then we stimulate that sort of access to science in a way that becomes action, and an action that is long-standing. It can withstand literally everything because it's inside people's lives. So that's the chain of events that should happen for this to become really powerful. And I think we are going in that direction. For example, some cities, they're starting having their climate ambassadors in the neighborhoods. So they're not communicating directly, but they are choosing some figures that act as some in-between figure that is not the city, but it's a person. It's a trusted person that has been educated on specific topics, knows what it's talking about, is aware, and is happy to act on it. And it can transfer this to the community. And I think these sort of linkages really unlock the potential that we currently have, but we are not using that much.
We are reaching the end of this podcast. I think we could go on for hours, but that's the format. But I would like to kind of make a step back with you and think of, really imagine your ideal scenario. Really, if you could change one thing about the way climate science informs news and policies today, or the way cities are shaped, what would it be? And how do you think this shift could accelerate some kind of meaningful action? So if you had a magic wand.
Yes, exactly. If I had a magic wand, I think I put it to work dismantling the condescending notion that young people can't lead the charge on climate action. Instead, I think we should really adapt the way we inform news and policy to get them fully on board, empower them from the get-go, right from primary school, to become climate ambassadors. And let me paint you a picture. This summer, I had a front row seat to an impromptu environmental lesson during Ferragosto in Italy. Picture this. Some young entertainers who got people dancing and having fun, they were gleefully firing confetti cannons into the sea, so plastic bits everywhere.
Oh no!
Okay, no, so naturally, I spent half a day cleaning up the mess. And I was politely nudging the event organizers to join, and I asked, where are the young folks who sprayed this plastic? Shouldn't they be helping? Oh, and the reply I got was this. Oh, they're young. They don't care. Was a very dismissive reply, to say the least. And to be honest, my heart sank in that moment, but I kept at it. And then an 8-year-old girl approached with a handful of collected plastic, and she asked me, are you an environmentalist? You're right to be upset. Look at the mess they did. That's not good for the fish. That's not good for us. It's plastic. It's really, can I help you?
Oh,
And now that there it was, the spark of change that we need. And it's about recognizing that our future isn't just in the hands of politicians and scientists. It's really in the hands of our youth. So we need to invest in them, even in communication, nurture their curiosity because they are curious, and cultivate a new generation of climate leaders who do care. So with them at the forefront, we can transform how climate science informs our world and accelerate the action we desperately need. So I like to imagine a world where every young person grows up understanding and advocating for the planet. Now, that's really a news that I'd love to hear and read every day. But just think about the policies we could create. If we could just have a global army of inspired, informed young minds pushing for change. Well, I might possibly just be dreaming, but if you think about it, it is not so hard.
No. And I know some of them, and I think I was myself a little bit this way when I was younger, and I still fight for something at my own level. So yeah. I think it's really about like the power of accumulating all those small actions from kind of everyone and trying to challenge what's out there. Yeah, I think we could go on for hours, but Giulia, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and congratulations again on the IPCC. We will take some news, and I'm looking really much forward to seeing how that unfolds in the years to come. And please, you're welcome on the show anytime you want to tell us more about climate science, especially with this now IPCC that you have on your head. And thank you so much, Giulia.
Thank you so much, Marine, for inviting me again. And yes, it will be a pleasure to be back.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Energetic. It's been a pleasure diving deep into the world of sustainability and the just energy transition with some of the most forward-thinking mouths out there. I'm Cornelis, your host from policy consultancy Next Energy Consumer, and it's been an incredible journey growing this podcast together with you, our knowledgeable and passionate listeners. Since 2021, we've shared countless stories, insights, and ideas over more than 40 episodes, and it's all thanks to your support and enthusiasm. If you enjoyed our journey so far and want to help us keep the conversation going, why not support us on Patreon? Every bit helps us bring more inspiring content your way. Check out the show notes for the link. And hey, if you're a part of an organization that shares our passion for a sustainable and inclusive energy future, we're excited to explore sponsorship opportunities with you. It's a fantastic way to connect with a dedicated audience and make an even bigger impact together. Shout out to the fantastic Igor Mikhailovich from Podcast Media Factory for his incredible sound design work, making every episode a joy to listen to. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Energetic on your favorite podcast platform. And if you think a friend or a colleague could benefit from our episode, we'd love for you to spread the word. It helps us grow and keep the energy transition conversation alive. Sharing is caring. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to stay engaged and update on all things energetic. Thanks once again for lending your ears. Until next time.